Welcome to Vacation Bible School Training March Madness, and this is our first session, so we're so grateful that you decided to join us tonight.
And I'll let you know if we need to hold that thought. But one of the ways that we can support our volunteers is, there's lots of ways we can support our volunteers, but one framework that you can use is let's do it the way Jesus did. Jesus had lots of volunteers. He happened to call them disciples. He had lots of people that he supported in spreading the gospel message. And so when we do VBS, and particularly if you are a director, there are ways to support your volunteers the way Jesus did. So there's probably a lot more than four, and I am just going to go with the four that you see here on the screen. And I will go into each one of these individually. So how do we equip and support our volunteers? We're honest with them when we're recruiting them. Jesus was honest, and he wanted his disciples to know three things. He wanted them to understand in a clear way, and he wanted them to understand that they had a role to play, and he met them where they were at. He talked to them so they understood. The first thing he did is he cast a vision, gave them the big net. Kind of, what is it that I want to get across here? And a good way for us to remember that is to use the verse from Luke: do good and lend, and expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. So he kind of gave that overall, our overarching definition and vision. And I think sometimes we forget that when we're recruiting our volunteers. Let's let them know what kind of vision we have for this, more than just the decoration, more than just that one class or that one rotation spot leader. He told his disciples exactly what he wanted of them. So not only did he cast an overall vision, but then he said, okay, this is what I want from you. And one of the ways that we can see that play out is when he talked to them and said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He was talking to them. They were fishermen, so he was talking to them in words that they understand. If you are talking to somebody who is an educator by trade, you are going to explain VBS one way versus somebody who is an accountant but is willing to step up and try working with the kids, that they're going to need a little bit different explanation of kind of where it is. Someone who's new to the church is going to need a little bit more explanation or different explanation than someone who's been doing this for years or who has been around the church for years. The last one is, let's remember that this is our kingdom work, and God and Jesus wanted us to understand that this is our kingdom work, and he gave us the Great Commission to remind us of that. This is the way we are going out and spreading the news, and we have to kind of always remember that. So we are going to have a trivia break. We have a couple of prizes that we're going to give out, so Sandy's going to monitor the box. But one of the things that it was so important when we are trying to recruit our volunteers is to be honest with them. This is what I expect. This is what we as a church are standing for. This is what VBS means to us. We're honest with them. And we want to try to avoid that, oh, don't worry, it'll be easy. Or, you know what, it's not a big deal. Because that's a dishonest kind of recruitment technique. And so when I looked up dishonesty in the dictionary, it says wanting in honesty, void of integrity, faithlessness, disposed to cheat or defraud, not trustworthy as a dishonest man. So my trivia question is, how many times is the word dishonest mentioned in the Bible? How many times is dishonest mentioned in the Bible? We want to see, tell me if you can vote early and often.
So it's going to be the one closest without going over.
Yes, the one closest without going over. Thank you, Sandy.
Yep.
And I can't see any of the numbers,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for a couple more to come in. Yep. Okay. Very good. All right. The closest one.
Okay, so you ready for the answer?
Yep, the closest one.
Here's the answer.
I have two that have said 30, and it was 33, right?
Yes, 33 is the answer. 33 times the Bible mentions dishonest. So we kind of know how important this is.
Yep, so Shulam is one, and Anita.
Yay.
Very good. Okay.
Yes. New winners. We always like that.
You'll be getting some postcards.
Oh, yay. So another way that Jesus equipped his volunteers, aside from being honest with them, was to teach them and train them. And he did this in a lot of different ways. One of the ways that Jesus trained people is through group training. He had different kinds of groups, but it was one Jesus and many people. Another way that he trained people was individual training. So when you think of the story of Zacchaeus or the woman at the well, that was a one-on-one interaction where he was training them and teaching them. And it was just one person. When we're talking about VBS, we have to be ready to talk about training people one-on-one, and as well as using group training. So group training can come in the form of like a large group, like Jesus's Sermon on the Mount, or it can come in terms of a small group, like when he had his meals with his disciples. So for a VBS director, you could think of a large, like everybody involved in VBS kind of meeting, and then maybe a meeting with just your preschool staff or just your rotation leaders, or kind of dividing it up so that you can target the kinds of information you want to get. There are pros and cons to each of these kinds of trainings, and I'm sure that some of our VBS directors are going, individual training? Oh no. But let's just kind of take a look at the pros and cons. So I kind of tried to outline the pros and cons in 4 different areas, if you will. So the first area is really time. And we have time for the trainer and the learner. So for example, if you're doing a one-on-one training, that is not a whole lot of time for the learner, but it is an inordinate amount of time for the director or the leader. You can kind of divvy that out by having a preschool coordinator or a somebody who is experienced with some of the rotations, kind of leading the individual instructions there. But you do need to kind of take a look at the amount of time, the amount of details. So there's always good information that can be given in general. And so we have kind of the this is what times we're going to run, this is the rotations we're going to run, this is that kind of everybody needs to know. But then there's the specific information about maybe the group of kids that's coming in that's between, first and second and third and fourth grades, and how we've got to, kind of divide those up. And you don't really want to have to tie up the whole rest of the group as you're discussing this. So you can usually go into a lot more detail when you have a smaller group, or if you're individual, where you can really hone in on this is how you would get to that piece of information for this age group. The other thing is relationships. I can't stress this enough. VBS is, I think, the most amazing venue for developing relationships in a church. Not only are we intentionally developing relationships with people outside of our church, but we are forging and strengthening the relationships within our church. That fellowship time cannot be underestimated. And when we are looking at a large group, we are looking at horizontal relationships. So we have the director, but we also, I'm learning from somebody else's questions, or wow, somebody else seems to have the same ideas as I do, or somebody else looks confused the way I look. And so I can get a lot of good relationships going this way. When you're in a smaller setting or a one-to-one, the relationships are much more vertical. It's really the director and the learner, or the volunteer. And so sometimes you need to strengthen this relationship, or sometimes you need to strengthen this relationship. So think about that when you're thinking about it, not just in terms of time or in terms of detail, but think about the types of relationships that you want to foster. The last one is the learning style. Some people are really shy and can't learn in a large group, and some people will just take over a large group, and the last thing you want is to give them an audience. So you want to make sure that the education, you might have a volunteer that has a particular difference in the way they learn, and so they need to have things mapped out a little bit differently than some of the other people. And you may need to do a large group and then go follow that up with a smaller one-to-one training or support for that individual volunteer. And some people honestly would prefer to just here's the book, read it first, then come talk to me. They like to learn that way. So not only do we have to be conscious of the way our children are learning, we have to be conscious of the way our volunteers learn as well. Okay, so I want you to think about, here's a little break for everybody. What are some unique and creative ways of relaying information to others working in VBS? So we kind of talked about small group, individual, and large group. What are some other ways that we can relay information to others working in VBS? How can we
Group text.
provide, what is it?
Group text.
A group text. Perfect. Yes. I just got on one last night from our leader. Okay, we need another one. The first two ideas in this chat will get a set of postcards.
Email.
Yep. I love that idea, because you know what? What's the rotation schedule? What are we, what are the who's teaching in what area? That stuff we don't have to go over in a group. Just send me an email, give me the bare bones.
Yeah, somebody's asking, do you think it's good to create a Facebook group for workers?
It really depends on your church and how they communicate. I know in our church, we have a private Facebook group for our church. And so it wouldn't be unheard of in our particular church to form a Facebook group for VBS workers, so that the information is there and you can go back and get it, rather than going through 500 emails. If your church doesn't tend to communicate on Facebook, that's probably not the best. You want to make sure it's a private group. That's the only problem. You want to make sure that people feel comfortable sharing ideas. But how does your church communicate?
And somebody said, I work with some youth and we have joined a Pinterest group for ideas.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's a great idea. And I think the Spark Studio is is particularly attractive to some of our youth in helping out. So definitely using what they are in, the way they communicate, I think would work best. And Pinterest is a great way. All right. So Sandy, you'll take care of sending
Got them
out.
all. Yes, Anita, Jan, Amy, and Jolene. I'm going to send you all a little prize for your participation there. Very good.
Okay. So another way that Jesus supported and equipped his volunteers is to send them out. So he trusted them. He said, here's your information. I've trained you. Here is your information. Now go and share. And so sometimes he just did the on-the-job training. You get to go and so it's not probably my go-to on the whole VBS thing, but I have a confession to make that I was never actually a VBS teacher prior to being the director. So I got a lot of on-the-job training. And what it did is it helped me figure out, I had to go search out who was the expert in this area and who'd been doing that and who had information on this and who had an opinion on that. And it wasn't without its faults, but I felt like I learned a lot that year. So it's not out of the question. You could take your volunteers and pair them with an experienced leader. So for example, just for safety's sake, you never ever want to have one adult in a room with kids. You always want to make sure you have two leaders. And sometimes you can pair somebody who has been in the church for a long time with somebody who has not been in the church. You could pair somebody who has teaching experience with someone who doesn't have teaching experience. You can pair someone who is more mature with a youth. So looking at your pairings and how you can pair males and females, because I know that that's important, especially, as they get older, we also want to have some good male role models for our children. So making sure that we're sensitive and thoughtful about pairing our leaders. And the last is a great idea that I heard in the workshop that I had gone to, was the idea of coaches. Every church has those glorious people who have been there and done this for year after year. And for whatever reason, whether it's their physical health, whether it's just their time to retire and they just need to bow out, they are a great resource. So if you've got a new teacher in the first and second grade and you have one of your church members who's been doing it for years, but they don't really want to teach, maybe they could help coach and they can guide that person through learning about how to set up their lessons, or guide them through how to set up the class or manage the class behaviors or things like that. That's a great role for some of our elderly population, perhaps, maybe some of our more experienced people who physically can't be participating. Maybe they are working during the day or during the time you're having VBS, but they would be willing to coach a new teacher. So let's not forget the people just because they can't be present at the time of VBS. Then there's some other things that we need to consider. So we've talked about the four things that, kind of the way Jesus taught his disciples. As there are some other things that we need to at least attend to. So the first thing is, when I say follow up, I'm not talking about following up with the people who attended VBS after VBS ends. I'm talking about following up after a training or after some kind of instruction. So even when Jesus sent his disciples out, he followed up with them and made sure that they had what they needed and um, were supported out in the field, if you will. So we need to, as directors and or people that are acquiring our volunteers, we need to address the worries of the volunteers. Are they worried about the weather? Are they we have a teacher who can't be too hot. She has a disability where she has to stay cool. So we have to be able to address the worries of those volunteers. Do our volunteers have the resources they need? And please, 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 directors, specifically check with your seasoned volunteers, because they're the ones that are going to be the one that are going to speak up the least. They're not going to be the ones that come to you and say, I'm having troubles, or I'm having a problem, or I don't understand. So it's really important when we're following up to kind of target not only our new, but also our seasoned. Hello. There we go. And we need to find the right place for everybody. There is a place for everybody. If you have somebody in your church that doesn't read, there is still a role for them at VBS. If you have somebody in your church that doesn't like to talk to people, well, great. They can be in the background and working on counting the monies that come in for a donation. If you had you there is a place for everyone at VBS, and I can't stress that enough. That when we stretch out and ask for support to run a VBS, we want to take all the volunteers we can get. And not only do we want to do that because it lightens the load on everybody, but it also strengthens the church. When you can bring everybody together around this one united cause, maybe there's somebody that can't be there during the VBS hours. So great, they're on the decorating committee. Or maybe you have somebody who doesn't think that they have 1 ounce of creativity in them, but they are really good at cleaning toilets. So there's a place for everybody, and I can't stress that enough. The last area that I really want to make sure that our directors particularly is take care of yourself. Please remember that it's okay for a volunteer to take a step back, take a year off, to take time and say, no, I don't want to do that this year. And it is not a personal affront. It's not against you or anything else. It's just where they're at. And I wished I really had heard this last year, because I think I would have understood a little bit better. We had quite a few people who were just like, I can't do any more with the whole way the whole school year went. I need to kind of take some space. And it's okay. And we have to all remember that it's okay. So, last but not least, one of the ways that Jesus supported his workers or his volunteers or his disciples or his whatever is he prayed for them. We can't forget the importance of prayer. Jesus not only prayed for in his own way when he would leave and go off by himself and pray individually, he also prayed as a group. And we need to remember, as a VBS staff, that we need to pray individually for VBS, but we also need to pray corporately. We need to pray for our volunteers before VBS is even starting. Right now, as they're just signing on. I mean, maybe some people have already done their VBS and this is a little bit late, but we need to pray for the volunteers that are going to be putting in all those hours for VBS. you need to pray for yourself. If you're a volunteer, you need to be praying for yourself. If you're the director, you need to be praying for yourself. If you're the custodian, you need to be praying for yourself, because it's important. By the way, I did not count how many times the word prayer was mentioned in the Bible. We need to pray for the leaders of our church, whether it's our deacon teams or our pastor or our director or the person that's leading the music. We need to pray. The best thing that I have found is enlisting a prayer partner. Whether it's somebody that can pray with me by myself, or, just the two of us before and after, or whether last year I had a older couple and they were my prayer partner. I was teaching a class and they were my prayer partner. And so every day when I started, and I was like, here's the list of kids that are in my class. And so at the end of that day, I sent them a quick email and was like, this is this one, and this is this one, and this is this one. And, this one likes this kind of thing. And this one seems a little anxious, and this one's a little shy. And I'm really not sure about this one. So please pray that I kind of am able to reach that one. And then the next day I would send them, oh, this one really opened up, or this one really had a meltdown, or this one, or I got a new person, and this one brought a friend. And so what they did is they would pray over each individual child that was there, because by name. And they, even though they weren't participating in VBS on a daily basis, they felt like they were there. And so it not only gave specific prayers to each kid in my group, but it strengthened the bond between me and this older couple, and also the older couple and VBS. And I think that it made them want to participate more. It's really important to enlist that prayer team early, before VBS starts, as it's getting planned. Even you want to get your prayer team going during VBS and after. We can't emphasize enough that follow-up. Okay, so I tried to go as fast as I could, but so I want you to write this down or share it with someone if you're still on the line. List something in the chat. What's one thing that you're going to do this year to become more like Jesus? And I'm not asking you to do this because I want you to confess all of your sins in a Zoom session, but I want you to think about what's something you could get better at. What's one thing you would like to do to be more like Jesus in supporting your volunteers? Whether you are a volunteer and you want to support other volunteers, or whether you are the director and you want to support volunteers, or whether you're the pastor and you want to support your volunteers, or the church secretary, or your everybody has a role. And so what's one thing you're going to do to be more like Jesus?
Okay, we have patience, patience, patience. I love that. And giving my stress to him, stopping to pray when something comes up, pray with them and for them, be more selfless with my time, and get more organized earlier. Excellent.
Those are really good. Yep.
Yeah, praying more for them.
So I thank you all